Chairman Jones brings a unique and varied background to the position of chairman. He was the primary legislative coordinator for the state police when riverboat and video poker gaming were first approved in 1991, and he participated in the debate and discussions which eventually resulted in the legalization of gaming. Thereafter, he was a senior operational and policy advisor and department spokesperson for the state police when they established the regulatory structure and began issuing licenses. He and his board oversee an industry which annually generates more than $3 billion in total net revenues and nearly $750 million in state revenues. The board is responsible for maintaining public confidence in and operational integrity of 15 riverboat properties, the land-based casino in the city of New Orleans, more than 2,000 licensed video poker establishments, 4 racetracks, and 4 racetrack slot gaming facilities. Chairman Jones was named as the North American North American Regulator of the Year in 2017 by the International Masters of Gaming Law. He also has extensive experience in the academic sector as a professor of both public and private universities. Today I'd like to introduce Mr. Ronnie Jones.
I need to be standing on the box. Can y'all still see me with this? Thanks for having me. I told Doug before we started that it's been 22 years since I've appeared before the press club, and I'm glad to be back. A little background, first of all, to kind of lay out how we got to where we are today. You know, when Estes Kiefoff was traveling around the country conducting hearings, it was not by accident that one of his primary hearings was held in New Orleans. And that's because in 1952 and 1953, even though gambling was illegal, it was rampant. We actually had more slot machines in the state of Louisiana in 1952 than in the state of Baton, where it was legal. My first foray while I was in state police into gaming was I was part of a 2-person team that went to Atlantic City. Governor Edwards was in about his second term, and he sent 2 of us to Atlantic City to study the impact of gambling, which had just been legalized there. We prepared a report, a fairly comprehensive report, and I remember preparing a cover letter from Colonel McCormick to Governor Edwards. And I was driving Colonel McCormick down to the mansion to deliver the report about 2 days before Christmas of that year. And he's reading the cover letter. And I'm paraphrasing, but somewhere in that letter I said something to the effect of, from a law enforcement standpoint, we could never condone the legalization of commercial gambling. And he read that and ripped that page out. So that never made it to Governor Edwards, not that it would have changed his mind. So fast forward to Buddy Romer. Poor Buddy Romer was facing much of the same fiscal issues that our state had been facing over the last 5 or 6 years. And in 1990 and 91, he was facing the same sort of problem. How do we raise revenue without raising taxes? So as very vogue at the time around the country, they decided they were going to try and authorize riverboat casino gaming in Louisiana. On a separate track, but in the same session, Peggy Bruno introduced a bill to legalize video poker devices. And he did that primarily not only to raise revenue for the state, but to eliminate the black market of illegal video poker machines that were out there. Both bills went through the legislative process, but not without a lot of blood being let on the floor. It was ugly. I was talking to Brenda beforehand. We were talking about how ugly things have gotten at the legislature over the last few years, just the animosity between the different groups. And such was the case when gambling was legalized in Louisiana. There was a lot of angst over that. End of the session, video poker was legalized, including at truck stops in the last week of the legislative session. And 15 riverboat casino licenses were authorized by the legislature. So what Buddy Romer had proposed and turned into legislation with the assistance of the legislature was now left to the next governor to implement, and that would be Edwin Edwards. that was a tough time. Throughout the legislative debate, everybody said state police is going to be put in charge, it's going to be handled the right way, we're going to give the resources, the people, the expertise to do this, the budget. Well, that's not exactly what happened. In 1992, when we started the process, they didn't give us any additional people, and they didn't increase our budget. And I don't think that was done intentionally by the legislature. I don't think it was done intentionally by Governor Edwards. But we found ourselves in battle on several fronts. We managed to make everybody in the process mad, including the media, the public, the people who wanted to get into the business of gambling in the state, that is the licensees. It was ugly. I can say out of the 44 years that I've been working in the state of Louisiana, it was the 2 worst years of my career. It wasn't the best of times and the worst of times. It was just the worst of times in state police. It was hard. And it's taken us a long time to recover. I say us, the regulatory side of state police and my gaming board. In 1996, the first real tinkering with the organizational structure was done by Governor Foster. I think Cheney Joseph probably was the architect of that, and they took this former Byzantine system of a Riverboat Gaming Commission and a Gaming Control Board and state police, and they put it all into one structure. So this day, we have a 9-person board, I have a 3-person staff, and we rely on state police to do the hard work, most of the enforcement work. We rely on the Attorney General's office to provide legal counsel, and it's a pretty good system. I'm familiar with most of the regulatory structures in the country, and this is a pretty good system. So, how did I get here? I'm probably the least likely guy you ever would have thought would be in charge of regulating gaming in the state. Until my appointment to this position, I had never been to Las Vegas. Just wasn't, you know, if it wasn't a national park, I had no interest in going. And Las Vegas is a nice place. It's just not for me. Gambling has never been something I've been a big participant in. I've played 1 session of blackjack at a casino in my entire life. I've never played roulette. I'm not even sure I totally understand how craps is played. So when I was appointed by Governor Jindal, I think I was as surprised as anybody else. If you go back and read some of the stories that were done when I was a spokesperson for state police, I used terms like insidious, predatory. I appropriated a term from a researcher in Illinois. He called video poker the crack cocaine of gambling. I used that term a lot. I wasn't a fan of gambling in 1992 or 94, but I've evolved. And I think I'm mature. I don't know that I'm any wiser, but I take a different view of gambling. You know, gambling's in a different place. Today, gambling in the state, legal gambling, is fairly stable, and it's a huge part of our budget. We have, depending on which survey you look at, the 3rd or 4th largest commercial gaming market in the entire country. It's huge in Louisiana. We wager nearly $4 billion every year legally. That's not taking into account what's wagered illegally. And $750 million of what I regulate goes to the state budget. If you figure in the state lottery, if you figure in charitable gaming, if you figure in pari-mutuel wagering, those 3 things I don't regulate, it's nearly $1 billion to the state budget. We've surpassed, the gambling industry has surpassed oil and gas in terms of revenue contributing to the state budget. So it's a huge business in the state. Riverboat accounts for more than half, right at about 60% of the revenue that comes into the state. Video poker comes in at about 23%, and the slots at the track and the land base both come in at about 10%. So Riverboat is key in terms of the revenue that it generates for the state of Louisiana. Riverboat and the land-based casino have fulfilled that public perception of a promise that this money is going to education. There's no money from video poker that goes to education. But the land-based casino, the slots at the track, and the 15 riverboat licensees contribute, over the last 5 years, about $150 million every year to education. It's called the self-fund. I'm not exactly sure what it stands for. I have forgotten. So riverboats. The market's been fairly stable. What used to be a robust market in northwest Louisiana has now eroded somewhat because of the advent and explosion of tribal gaming in Oklahoma. The first exit off the interstate out of Dallas-Fort Worth in Oklahoma is one of the world's largest tribal casinos, right there, the first exit. So all of that Dallas-Fort Worth market has shrunk in Louisiana. It's been taken over by the southwest Louisiana market, which is getting now Beaumont, Galveston, Houston, and that's the leader now. Riverboat employs about 22,000 people in the state. It's a huge business. It's a huge industry. They invested about $52 million in capital improvement projects last year. I mean, that's jobs. That's plumbers and carpenters and people who sell carpet and plywood and nails. That's about creating jobs, and that's the reason we have Riverboat Gaming, was to promote economic development. More than half of the patrons of riverboats come from outside the area where the riverboat is located, which means out of state or more than 150 miles from that property. So it's not just Louisiana people who are spending money, and that's been a goal from the beginning as well, is to try and lure in people from other states to spend their money in Louisiana and benefit us. I had a conversation with Ronnie Johns, as opposed to Ronnie Jones, a couple of years ago. He's from Lake Charles, he's a senator from Lake Charles, and he said, what can we do to promote the continued growth and economic development in the riverboat industry? And I suggested to him that we create a panel to study it over a period of a couple of years and make recommendations to changes in the legislation, because the legislation had been in place, the laws had been in place for a quarter century with virtually no change. Even though every other state has taken boats off the water, permitted gambling on land, Louisiana still had this riverboat sitting in water concept. So we created a task force. He created it with a Senate concurrent resolution. I was named as chairman. He was the vice chairman of that. We had 3 senators, 2 state representatives, representatives from the governor's office, state police, the attorney general, the industry, economic development, and we met over a period of 17 months. And we heard from 45 witnesses, 8 CEOs, and we got a couple of dozen recommendations from the industry. Senator Johns and I both decided that we needed to be very conservative about what we asked the legislature to do, or risk losing everything. So we synthesized those couple of dozen recommendations down to 2 major recommendations. And as you probably are aware, this past legislative session, the legislature, with very few votes to spare, approved a new law that permits riverboats to come onto land within 1,200 feet of their legal berthing or their dock, the point at which they've been authorized to conduct legal gambling in the state on the river. They can come in 1,200 feet. In addition to that, we've changed the method whereby we measure, rather than square footage of casino floor space, we will now count devices. And that's attributed to the fact that, you know, in 1991, all the slot machines were the same size. You look at a slot machine today, it may have 4 seats, and it may take out a dozen traditional slot machine spaces. So the technology has changed and it's evolved, but we were still stuck in the industry with a 30,000 square foot cap on gaming space. So that's 60% of the gaming business in Louisiana. The other big chunk is video poker. Video poker, we've got about 13,000 devices in the state spread across 1,700 locations. Most of the devices can be found at truck stops. If you don't know how that came to pass, you should read Tyler's book, Bad Bet on the Bayou, because it goes into great detail about the deal that was cut in the last days of the session that ended up including the eligibility of truck stops to have video poker. There are about 202 truck stops in operation today. We've got probably the best served trucking industry of any other state in the country. I'm told by the industry that video poker has about 30,000 jobs in play as a result of their industry. They transfer about $125 million every year into the state general fund. So they're a big piece of the action, not the largest piece, but they remain a big piece of the action in Louisiana. So let's talk a little bit about a couple of things that, one that did happen in the session, one that didn't make it out of the session. Let's talk about sports betting first. Betting on sports is as old as humanity. I mean, in ancient Rome, there were records of betting on chariot races, horse races. So it's been around a long time. Today, at least until the Supreme Court decision, there's legal sports betting, which has occurred in primarily Nevada, and then illegal all over the country. I would wager, although I don't, that most of you know how to bet on a football game. Some of the sports betting is done through your barber or someone that you know from work. The balance of the illegal market is on the internet. Those are primarily offshore operations. What you have to keep in mind is, and what I try to share with Senator Martini and the others involved in this debate, is part of our goal, if they're going to try and authorize sports betting in Louisiana, is to eliminate that black market. Eliminate, because where's that money going? If you're betting with a bookie, at some bar, where are those winnings going? I would suggest they're probably not being used to build playgrounds in disadvantaged neighborhoods. Right? That money's going into areas that probably don't serve the public purpose very well. And we know that as a matter of fact. But they're sophisticated operations. Nobody really knows how much money is wagered illegally on sports betting. I mean, there are a lot of numbers that are thrown around now. The Final Four, Super Bowl, but we don't know precisely how much money is being wagered in the illegal market. So it's been legal since 1949 in Nevada, and they've had a corner on the market until the Supreme Court in the recent Pathway decision overturned the federal ban, which now permits states to decide whether or not they want to permit sports book in their in the individual states. There are half dozen states currently in the process of implementing sports betting in their jurisdictions. Mississippi went online last week. New Jersey's already online. Delaware went online within a couple of weeks after the decision. West Virginia's not far behind. Pennsylvania's not far behind. And it's the anticipation is that another 20 states will legalize sports betting over the next 3 or 4 years. And I think that's probably reasonable to assume that that's going to happen. So what happened in Louisiana? Senator Martini, who was on my riverboat gaming task force, got an earful from the CEOs about how important sports betting would be for Louisiana. In fact, I don't do very many smart things, but one of the smarter things that I did was take 3 of the senators on my task force to Atlantic City to let them see how New Jersey regulated gaming, to let them look at the boardwalk and see what happens in an area where an industry doesn't have the opportunity to grow and to prosper. They learned a lot on that. One of the things that they brought back was an understanding of how important sports would be if the Supreme Court authorized it. So our task force did not take a position on sports betting, but Senator Martini on his own introduced a bill to shove out into a referendum form the questions to the parishes. Do you authorize sports betting in your jurisdiction? The initial bill would have permitted sports betting at brick and mortar, on the 15 riverboat licenses and at the 4 slots at the track facilities. There was some opposition from the video poker industry in Louisiana. And during the course of the committee hearing, Senator Martini turned and spoke to the representative of the industry and said, okay, if we include you guys, will you remove your opposition? Sure, yeah. So they opened it up in the proposal to video poker establishments as well as all the casinos. The bill died, and I'm not surprised by that. I think the perception was we're opening this up too quickly at too many locations, and if we're going to do it, we need to do it conservatively. That wasn't the approach that the bill took. I believe that another bill will be introduced next year. I think it's going to happen in Louisiana. I just don't know when it's going to happen in Louisiana. I mean, this is incredibly common in Europe. Virtually all the countries in Europe permit not just sports betting, but in-game sports betting. Whether or not that guy is going to get a soccer ball into the net, right? If you're doing it with your mobile device as you're watching the game. That's where the evolution of sports betting is headed. It will be permitted in some states to do that before it's all over. The thing about sportsbook is it's risky. It's a risky business. You can actually lose money. If you're the licensee, you can lose money. It's high risk and low margin. There's an awful lot of money wagered. It was $5 billion in Nevada last year on a regular year, but it's a low profit margin. It's about 5%. So we don't know what the tax rate in Louisiana would be if it were authorized here, and that will well determine how successful it is in the state. What I think casinos will tell you is they're not going to make a lot of money off sports betting. That's an amenity, just like their spa, just like their pool, just like their nightclub. You're probably not aware, but Las Vegas, non-gaming revenue today outstrips gaming revenue. They make more money off the restaurants, the pools, the spas, the retail, than they do off the slot machines, blackjack, roulette, and everything else. That's the movement in the industry now. You need something to bring people in, staying in hotels, buying meals, buying cocktails. That's where the future of gaming is in terms of a business. This isn't the cash cow that some people have thought it might be for the state. One estimate by Oxford Economics, I believe, said that Louisiana handled the amount of money that's wagered in sports, for example, could range between $3 and $5 billion every year. And the gross gaming revenue, that is, after bets are placed and the bets are paid off, it might be in the range of $245, $265 million. And then the state would tax on top of that. This is really a moving target right now. I saw that MGM entered into a contract with the NBA last week, and the NBA is going to provide exclusive proprietary data during the course of games to MGM licensed facilities. So we don't know where NFL, baseball league, all the other leagues are going to be looking for a deal. The integrity fee is off the table. And I've been working with a group of co-regulators from around the country. We meet at UNLV 2 or 3 times a year to try and figure out our path forward. We're all trying to figure out that model piece of regulatory structure for sports betting. It's still evolving. There's still a lot more surprises to come. So let's talk about something that did pass in the legislative session, and I was surprised, and that's fantasy sports. Fantasy sports actually began in the 1980s. It's not that new. It's new now because you can do it on a handheld device or you can do it on the internet. It started out as season-long play. And you would, for example, if you're playing NFL version of it, you would pick your players from among the several teams. And winning has nothing to do with the singular outcome of a game or games. It's based on analytical data on how well your players that you've selected for your team perform. Heavy on analytics. My weak point, so I've never played. DraftKings and FanDuel are the 2 commercial market makers today. The bill that was introduced by Representative Talbot and successfully getting out will authorize a referendum in every parish of the state in November. You want to permit fantasy sports to be played in your parish. So conceivably, we could end up the same situation we would have with video poker, where about half the parishes have approved it, another half haven't. And if that comes to reality, the state will have to determine how to geofence these parishes, so that if it's authorized in West Baton Rouge Parish, and I live in East Baton Rouge, and it wasn't authorized here, I can't play it on my mobile device until I cross that bridge and the Mississippi River. Then I can play it over there, because the technology will fence off every parish where it's authorized from those where it's not. I I've talked to the people who did that in New Jersey for local gaming, and I saw them recently at a conference in Cleveland, and I said, you know what the challenge would be is, I mean, you may have half parishes in and half out. I said, do you have the wherewithal to do that? I said, oh, absolutely. We've got the technology. We can do it. It will come at a price. So we don't know what the cost of geofencing the 64 parishes in the state will be. But I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is to see the vote of fantasy football. I was surprised when the Riverboat gaming bills went through the legislative process, how much pushback there was from some of the legislators. And I have absolute respect for a senator or representative who stands up and says, I have moral issues with this, I have a problem with this, I just don't think it's good for the families or for the state. I respect that opinion. But there were some who had some arguments that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I think this is going to be a clue for the legislature as to where their constituents come in on expanding gambling in the state. And it may portend what's going to happen with a sports book referendum if that comes in the next couple of years in Louisiana. So it will be a window into that world. One thing I want to close with before I take some questions, this is, Louisiana is one of the few states that actually funds its compulsive gambling program. There is an in-house treatment facility in Shreveport. Janet Miller is executive director of the Louisiana Association for Compulsive Gambling. They get money from Video Poker, the land-based casino, riverboats to help fund that in conjunction with DHH. We have a remarkable program in this state. And I think my early opposition to gambling was the sort of predatory nature of gambling, of taking advantage of people who have compulsive behaviors, whether it's shopping on the internet or drinking or drugs or playing slot machines. There are people who are weak in that area. So we have a robust self-exclusion program in Louisiana where a person who knows they have a problem can sign up to be excluded from casinos. And then there are requirements in the law for advertising the toll-free number for compulsive gambling in the state. Some people can't help themselves, and we have to be very careful. And I have conversations with the industry about, what new programs can we look at to help people like that. I'm particularly looking at a couple of programs in Massachusetts. They're really leading the way there, and I'm going to steal what they have once the final studies are around and shown to be effective. So this happens to be Responsible Education Gaming Week, ironically, and I want to thank Janet and all that she does for that sector of the population in Louisiana. It's very important to us. It's important to all of us. So with that, I'll shut up and be glad to try to answer any questions you might have. Oh, come on, guys. I know they cover everything. Yes?
Has the industry expressed any concerns about lost profits results from having neighboring Mississippi having sports betting?
Yes. Every CEO that came before, he asked if the industry had expressed any concern over Louisiana getting left behind on the sports book and Mississippi having it. Every CEO who came before our task force urged the task force to recommend a sports book bill. That's bigger than just riverboats, and we elected not to take an official position on it, but the properties here are very concerned that some people will go to Mississippi. We already lose a lot of business in Mississippi. They have a tax advantage on complimentary rooms, complimentary meals. People don't have to pay taxes on those in Mississippi. They do in Louisiana. And so Mississippi has a couple of competitive advantages. And I'm not sure, we had my colleague from Mississippi, Alan Godfrey, at one of the first or second task force meetings. And he sat down and he said, I just want to tell you guys, Louisiana did it the right way. And I'm wondering, what did we do right? And he said, by limiting the number of licenses, you probably made the right decision. He said, I could take you to some vacant properties now that are just rotting because they tried to open casinos and they didn't work here. He said, if there's anything that Mississippi doesn't need one more of today, it's another slot machine. So Louisiana is already competitively disadvantaged by some offerings in Mississippi. Sportsbook is going to help pile on in that regard. And yeah, the licensees in Louisiana have expressed concern about that.
Do they have any early numbers on how much profit loss they estimated?
No, you're talking about in Mississippi?
Or in Louisiana for not having?
No. It's hard to say, but some of the property owners have already told me, you know, they do mailings for people to come in, and they've heard from some of their regular players that, no, we think we're going to go to Mississippi, you know, for Christmas rather than Louisiana. So I'm not surprised by that at all. Yes,
Ronnie, what assessments of the Harrah's financial impact and benefits is being made or has been made, and would that be possible to be advanced in an election year?
that was an interesting evolution to watch. I wasn't intentionally, I was not put in negotiations there. I'm a regulator. I can't be the promoter and the cheerleader. And the governor told me what was going on, but I wasn't at the table saying, yeah, let's do this. I do believe that what Harrah's offered, all of that, $350 million was non-gaming. They weren't buying another slot machine with that money. That was to put a new hotel tower in. And something I think a lot of people didn't understand about that discussion was they offer, you know, Harrah's and Caesars have a worldwide network of members. And they send out invitations, you know, we're going to give you 3 room nights. They don't have enough rooms in their current hotel to bring people in. So those frequent players are going to go to another Caesars property somewhere else. Now, I'm not going to book a room at the Roosevelt or one of the other properties downtown. So they had good arguments. I think what happened with that, and it wasn't intentional. Dan Reel is the general manager there, one of the brightest general managers in the South. He's the general manager who sort of pitched that proposal. I don't think he intentionally withheld information about this real estate and investment trust, this Brpc. I think he just neglected to do it. He didn't see it as being a big issue, but it became a huge issue once that was disclosed during the legislative process. I have met with, unofficially, with executives from Caesars. The last time I was in Las Vegas. They don't need to buy me a cocktail. I have to buy them one out of my pocket. I'm okay with that. But over drinks, we talked about, okay, the wheels came off that proposal in Louisiana. We're going to get a second chance at it. They were very non-committal. Where a lot of the Caesars money is going right now is into sports book operations. They're making capital improvements in other properties because they've got a portfolio of properties around the world and throughout this country. Some of that money may well be lost. I hope not. I know that Dan is hopeful that he will get another opportunity. I know that the governor's office is hopeful that Caesars will come back and offer something to the state. Caesars pays about $60 million a year out of that casino in New Orleans. It's the larger of 21.5% of their gross gaming revenues are $60 million. So right now the state is guaranteed 60. That was going to be up, depending on what stage of negotiation, to $75 to $80 million. And I think the clock just ran out. And I can't take a position on whether or not the state should have gone for the deal, but I'm hopeful that the state can come to terms with Harrah's and Caesars to make that happen. I think it would be good for the city, and I think it would be good for the state. Yes, sir.
So as far as moving these riverboat casinos to land, obviously that was one of the big takeaways here from the past session. Where do you see that play in terms of the general outlook of these casinos over the next few years? I know here at Baton Rouge there's talk of construction, when it's going to be done, the logistics thereof in the next few months. But what's your picture of landscape for the next few years?
There are 3 properties in Louisiana that currently have engaged design architects to look at what conceptually a land-based facility might look at. The board, in its rules, development of its rules, we're developing those rules now. We're not going to set a bright line in terms of economic investment saying you have to, have a $125 million threshold or $300 million. We're not going to do that. We're going to look at each property separately based on where it's located. There are big differences between the Lake Charles market and Amelia. I mean, those markets are incredibly different. So what the task force intended to do was not just move the slot machines into some building on land. This was about building new resorts with amenities and having gambling, by the way. So at least 3 properties are, in the short term, probably going to try and make that move. We haven't approved the rules yet, so they haven't made any proposal to us yet. It was my intent as chairman of that task force not to focus on what's going to happen in 3 years or 5 years. Let's set up something that's going to benefit this state and its citizens for the next 10 years to 20 years. You have first generation boats like this thing sitting out here in the Mississippi River, which is dangerous, all right? And that was one of our concerns, was the safety of these vessels when people are on them during times of high water. And then you have later generation properties, like the Golden Nugget in Lake Charles. And they have to have a paddle wheel. It's not going anywhere. It has a cement hull. It has a small pool of water that the paddle wheel turns in. If they go in for a state police inspection, they turn the paddle wheel and it turns. So you have this continuum of properties. Golden Nugget isn't going to do anything in terms of moving that multi-million-dollar property further onto land. They're good where they are. They will take advantage of the change in how we measure the gaming space and probably put more gaming positions in. So there was something there for first generation properties and the later properties as well.
Ronnie, can you tell us which three properties will be on?
Tell you what, I'm sorry?
Can you mention the three properties?
What's the question?
Could you mention the three
She wanted to know if I could mention the three properties. The Belle of Baton Rouge has already expressed an interest in it. I'd rather not talk about the other two yet. Although one's been publicly reported, the Treasure Chest in New Orleans and Kenner is trying to figure out what will be the best business model for them to come onto land. There's a parking lot there. Kenner wants them to build a new resort, and Kenner's on fire right now economically, and their city council is taking a position of, y'all come on, get off the boat. The other one, I don't think it's been publicly disclosed. I don't feel at liberty to talk about it yet. But there are a lot of properties looking at, the economics of moving onto land. But they know that it's about building a new facility, not just moving the gaming into some existing building. Yes, sir?
In the first 6 months here in Baton Rouge in 2018, the collections and revenues have been a lot lower than they were in 2017 and 2016. Is there a driving factor that you can point to for that, and what is the board doing to change it?
I can't point to it scientifically, but my gut tells me that there's incredible competition that's growing in the gaming industry. I was part of a program, participant as a panelist recently, and I asked a representative of the American Gaming Association, the primary trade organization, I said, do you guys understand that you can oversaturate this country with options? And she didn't want to answer my question. But the fact is, you can only slice that entertainment pie so narrowly. I think one of the things that's going to hurt Baton Rouge a little bit is the smoking ban. And I'm a non-smoker, have never smoked, not a proponent of smoking facilities, but the one thing about that discussion that has troubled me is those people who push for the smoking ban refuse to acknowledge the economic. Just be honest and say, yeah, you're going to lose business, but it's better that you're not smoking. Just say that. I'm okay with that. But as soon as the smoking ban went into effect in East Baton Rouge Parish, the device, the amount of time spent on video poker devices in West Baton Rouge Parish went up. In New Orleans, when the ban was being considered for the land-based casino, I asked the auditors and state police to do some quick and dirty research. What's the potential impact of a smoking ban on the land-based casino? And they provided me with a report that said within the first 2 years, they're going to lose 18 to 20% of their gross gaming revenue. And the legislative fiscal office came behind and laughed us off the table and said, oh, that's too big of, no, that's not going to happen. Well, you know what? That's exactly what happened. That's exactly where the land-based casino is. And it's just part of, I think what's unfair is that it's an unlevel playing field in Louisiana. You have no smoking ban in Orleans Parish. You have no smoking ban now in East Baton Rouge Parish. But you don't have that in Lake Charles. You don't have it in Shreveport. None of the 3 tribal casinos have that. So it creates competitive issues. With respect to, what happened in the first 6 months, I don't know. I try not to focus too much on the short-term gains and losses and try and take a little bit longer view before I really offer an opinion as to what's going on. But I know that the smoking ban is going to have an impact on that, and that's just a fact of life. And will it be healthier? Absolutely. And I think that's a good thing. Yes?
The
you had one casino consider moving locations this year, going to Tangipahoa Parish, and ultimately that didn't happen. Do you think that may happen again, that there may be proposals to move, say, from Shreveport, Baton Rouge, or wherever? And then secondly, what's your opinion on that?
Okay, the question was asking me about the proposal that failed to move a property to Hammond in Tangipahoa Parish this past session. And then what, I anticipate that may be happening again, in my opinion on it. First of all, on the movement to Hammond, I'm from Tangipahoa Parish, which has nothing to do with my opinion about that, but every mayor in that parish was in favor of this project. Something like 9 of a 12-person parish council was in favor of the project. The early surveys by UNO showed widespread support in Tangipahoa Parish for that project. But 3 of the 4 senators representing that area did not see it that way. And that's their option. They can do that. I mean, that's the way the system works. And they refuse to support that project. I do believe that Shreveport and Bossier City have either 1 or too many licenses right now. The last license that was approved up there is Margaritaville, one of the finest resorts in the state, making an awful lot of money. It's really a pretty property. They take good care of their customers. But I wasn't chairman when that was done. But the board at that time had no way of knowing that tribal gaming was going to become so aggressive in Oklahoma. But that market has shrunk considerably. A couple of properties up there are having serious competitive issues. That was going to be one of them that moved from Bossier City to Tangipahoa Parish. There's a process in place, let's just say hypothetically, that Hollywood Casino wanted to move from where they are in Baton Rouge to another place in East Baton Rouge Parish. That would still take a parish referendum to permit a relocation of that license. And that's just a simple case. The one in Tangipahoa Parish was a little more complicated because they had to designate the Tangipahoa River as a navigable waterway before they could move the river road here. So it's been a 2-pronged vote. I think relocation of properties is a business decision that the state has to watch carefully. I would not be in favor of moving any licenses to Lake Charles to create another Shreveport-Bossier City problem. I think they have the right number of properties in southwestern Louisiana. But there are other parishes that riverboat gaming is authorized in the state that they could look at. And the board would weigh that very carefully. But ultimately, the people in that local parish are going to have the opportunity to say yes or no to the movement of that license. Yes, sir.
You've talked about stability in the gambling industry, but do you feel any uncertainty because of Mississippi, because of uncertainty about the Harris deal? I mean, what's the 5-year outlook here on this, and is that stability threatened?
I'm the eternal optimist, so the outlook is good, right? I'm not going to bet on that. I'm hopeful. There are a couple of things going on right now. There is a tribal casino. I don't want to use the term. That would be inappropriate. It's operating at the edge of the law. It's in Livingston, Texas. There's a proposal in Congress which might permit them to enter into a tribal compact. And if they build a big casino in Livingston, Texas, which is northeast of Houston, that's going to be a huge problem for the state. Arkansas is working to put a proposition on this ballot for November to have 3 casinos opened up there to contribute to the state's infrastructure fund, to build roads. Those are things that that could be troubling for the industry. None of these casinos are going to operate in the red. If their business was such that their model wasn't working anymore, they'd be done, because there are other markets in the country that they can go to. Right now, everybody's making money. The state's making money, I'm tentative about the future only because I expect Georgia to vote on it. I don't expect Alabama to vote on it. It's possible Florida could vote on it, Arkansas and Texas. I mean, all of those are within just a few hours drive, and that could spell trouble, 10 years, 20 years from now. I don't know. I won't be chairman by then.
So what's the source of your optimism then?
What's the what?
The source of your optimism.
I'm sorry.
what is the source of your optimism then? Why?
I've always been optimistic. All right, that's what drives me. All right, that's what gets me up in the morning. And keep in mind, I'm the regulator. All right, it's not up to me to run their businesses. I'm here to serve the public interest and the citizens and make sure that the state of Louisiana is well served by what they do. They have to make hard business decisions, and I'm just hopeful. I mean, we're gambling fools in Louisiana. We've always gambled, even when it wasn't legal, and we still gamble today in areas where it's not legal. So the money is going to be there, the entertainment value is always going to be there, and as long as there's a business opportunity, I think the business will be there to take advantage of it.
Do we have any other questions? Last question.
What's the timetable for moving casinos onto land? Do you have any sort of like, operating things that are operating under when you figure stuff will start moving onto land?
What was the first part?
What's the timetable for casinos moving onto land? Do you have any sort of like, schedule for these? Imagine it'll start happening.
The rules will be, we're in the process of drafting the rules now. We'll go through the administrative procedures process of public comment that will come before the board. The goal that I set, much to their dismay, State Police and Attorney General, was to have them in place by the end of the calendar year. So once those are in place, if you have 3 properties who have decided it's in their best business interest to invest $125, $150, $200 million in a new facility, they'll present that plan to the board, we'll evaluate it, and we'll vote on it. And if that happens the next calendar year, they'll start building new facilities, which creates jobs, which is what all this is supposed to be about anyway. I think I'm done.
Thank you.
Good job.